got another week of Leading Women Weekly Check-In. I'm Yolanda at Dryer Buzz, and over there she is. It's Angela Stalkup. Angela's got some data and some science for y'all. Y'all put her to work. I put her to work. I gave her a couple things. I'm like, look, and I'm gonna let her talk about something that she is so passionate about. I just saw your tweet before I came over here. So you got the challenge. You got to convince me to do something this week, and we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Look at Angela's like, oh wait, yeah, you've got to influence me this week to do a thing. We're gonna talk about that. What is the thing? I'll give you guys a heads up. It's the census. Angela has got to convince me to fill out this census form. And apparently, this most amazing thing we watched last night didn't have quite the impact on me that they thought they would. I enjoyed the show, but I was totally turned off by the fact that it was highly sponsored by the 2020 census. And look, come at me, guys, if you will. Tweet me. The email is dryerbuzz at Gmail. But I mean, really, when we talk about being influencers, and luckily for us, Angela knows the full trail and scale of this thing, and so she's going to talk about the census. And they're not sponsors of the show. Let me just say that, but it is something that has to do with our civic duty, and I'm thinking about the history of America. I'm bringing all that into it. Why is it that I don't trust this thing? Well, hopefully there's some influence. But listen, this is Leading Women Weekly, and here's what I need you all to do. Like I'm getting ready to do right here. Go over to there's a page on Instagram. There's a page on Facebook. We're not TikToking Leading Women yet. We're also right now we're live across a couple of platforms as well. You will see us engage. You're going to see definitely a couple people you're invited if your camera ready or feel your camera ready. There's a link in the description if you want to come on screen with us and get into the conversation. You're invited to do that beginning at 2:00. We invite some people on in case some of y'all just too scared to get out. We always have a backup. But we're excited today to invite back Dr. Sitachi Egru. Is going to come on and give us some advice at the 2:00 hour. So here in the first 30 minutes, Angela and I are going to get through what we call our burning topics. 3 things that you will love about watching Leading Women Weekly is we talk to you about what we make it gender specific as women. That's what we are. We talk about what we're earning this week, and what we're learning, and then we burn through some of the topics. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to throw it over to Angela. She's going to kind of give you guys a recap of a couple of the shows we just did and what we talked about and probably where we need to pick up on. All right, Angela.
So thank you, Yolanda. And just make me have to, you didn't get convinced last night. Now I got to convince you about the census. Well, that's interesting. Let me just put that pencil behind my ear. Yeah. So last week, and in fact, the last couple of weeks, we've gone actually starting last month, we've gone back to sort of our book club model where we're talking about a book. Our whole thing started off of a book, which was Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and then going to the event. So both Yolanda and I love reading and books, and we love to promote the work of women authors. So, last month we were talking about Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, which again, it's a big book and it's 400 pages of dense material, but absolutely worth reading. So you may still be working on that one. So this month we decided to focus on, instead of a book, we would do a program that is American Masters, Pbs.org. If you don't have PBS, if you've disconnected your cable or whatever, but you can watch it probably on PBS. It will air, but pbs.org, American Masters, Unladylike 2020. And it's actually, you can search, it's Unladylike 2021 word. And there's an hour-long program that talks about basically the hidden figures of women's history. And But the thing that I think Yolanda and I both really liked is if you sort of scroll down the website, they've taken, and I believe it's 20 some women, and have done little short segments on them. They're 10 to 12 minutes each, and will give you just basically you can take one person at a time and really learn about them. Then if you want to take that information and deep dive. So last week we talked about Charlotta Bass, who was the first Black woman to be a vice presidential candidate on a major political ticket, and was owned a newspaper in the was it
She did everything
prior
oh
to
my God.
World War I era. She really did. She was an incredible woman. Faced off with the Klan in her office with her handgun and chased 8 Klansmen right out the door. And I'm like, so this is a person that we finally started to hear about because of Kamala Harris's nomination. And people were saying, oh, here's the first Black woman, African-American woman. It's like, no, Charlotta Bass, 1952. And that was not that long ago. So
and that was towards the end of her life that she even
absolutely
did, middle up in the age. I won't say towards the end of her life, but after she'd done all these other amazing feats, still trying to do something. And actually Pelosi, I think Pelosi was one. Elizabeth, they talked about doing things later in life, having done the other priorities that they had in life, and still looking for something to fulfill them or to fulfill a position as such. So one of the things that I loved about Charlotta Bass is that, it encompassed something that because I always say, man, imagine if I had come out of a community or a culture that had the sensibilities. One thing I think that's plaguing African Americans is this erasure of history, and also plaguing women, is the erasure. You talked about this last week, the erasure about history. Is like Charlotta Bass was, one in a million. I mean, every city, every community had this type of storyteller, these types of fearless women. And unfortunately, we look at the civil rights movement, we look at history, period. It's all about the men, and you don't get the story of the women who were doing these things, not counter, but side by side. And because you think about it, we talk about, she owned a newspaper. Well, first of all, the newspaper, she inherited the newspaper from a gentleman who knew that she had the passion to keep his legacy going. They weren't even family members. She then brought in a man to do the writing, kind of like the whole Michelle Obama-esque thing there. They then became married. I don't know how much love was in there, but they were trying to survive the depression, and they were like, in order to run this paper, we probably need to just be married.
Yeah.
I'm not one to talk about marriage. I don't know, but all of these different things. But as I look back again on that episode, and I look around, and we look at what people had to reach back to her in order to validate or to just like wondering, man, is Kamala Harris like the first person? I think people didn't want us to get to 2020 and say, hey, this is the first time that we are really getting to the point of trusting women. I think people are wanting to say, we've been here before. We've done this before. We had a generation that trusted women before. Surely. I don't know what the boomers did with it, Dad, as my dad is on.
Daddy Buzz just got thrown under the bus.
Under the bus.
You just threw your dad under the bus of history.
I threw him under the bus of history only because he's a boomer. But I will say, if anybody goes down my father's timeline, inspiring women, like I never got to be that girl to say I can't do it because I'm a girl. Right. I mean, everything that I've ever done, my father is behind it. People say, behind a good woman is a man, is your dad, but then we know we live in a country where fatherhood is challenged. And so my father surpassed all of the challenges, including, my mother. But all of those challenges, I never got a chance to say I can't do something. And I'm just saying the boomers, when we look at this, because we're coming out of, you and I, coming from generations of our parents were boomers and our grandparents of the silent generation.
Yeah.
And our generation we had a lot of advantages. You and I can agree.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the boomers. Let me
Mm-hmm.
give them that as well, because of the civil rights movement. But then
Yeah.
we look at the civil rights movement was born out of the silent generation who were silently surviving a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things. We think back to that movie, The Butler. I took so much away from the
Mm-hmm.
Butler to understand the generations. Butler was a story about a butler who worked in the White House, and Oprah was in it. It was Forrest Whitaker, and their son ended up being a boomer and fighting for wanting to go off and fight in the civil rights, and so but also where women are, as we are at a point of uncovering where women should be and could be, we have to go back to history. And unfortunately, one of the things the boomers was complicit in is not helping the story of women as much as it could. I think in the boomer generation, their society pit men and women against each other
Mm-hmm.
more, probably more so than any other generation. Work, as far as work was concerned, as politics. Well, I guess when you think about the fact that you had a Charlotta Bass running for vice president on the third
Mm-hmm.
party, you can imagine the division that came along with women. So,
Well, and it's interesting to say there are two really, I see, I mean, and there's probably more than two things at play here.
mm-hmm.
But one is who controls the narrative, right? Who gets to tell the story? This is this is
Yeah,
Hamilton,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Ooh.
You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story, but you do have control over the narrative. We now have control over our own narratives.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long time, there was really who was controlling the main sources. This is Dryer Buzz's media apartheid, the thing that really drew me to Yolanda online, is to say media controls narrative. If you're just getting your narrative from media, right, or
Mm-hmm.
from public school education, right, and textbooks,
Mm-hmm.
who controls that, right? And this is where Charlotta Bass running a
Mm-hmm.
newspaper, printing, which was a black newspaper for to tell the stories that white media wasn't covering. I mean, she's the perfect illustration of that. So that's one. Two that I see going on with why are we not hearing these stories? And I cannot think of the term. I meant to look it up in advance, and I did not. There's a term in sociology or psychology
Mm-hmm.
of where, let's say that you make a gain, right? So let's
Mm-hmm.
say we have the first black woman who's a vice presidential candidate. And at that time, it would have been woman vice presidential candidate. It was a big deal, right? And so we tend to culturally say, okay, we did that. Now the problem's solved. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Barack Obama being elected president. Oh, great. We have a black president. Racism's over. That's solved. Now we don't have to worry about it anymore. So there is this tendency, again, of particularly culturally, and when we're talking about who is in power, dominant caste, patriarchy versus, women, is to say, okay, yeah, now, see, we had a female vice presidential candidate. We don't need to worry about that anymore. And so we're going to go back to the way things were. And we're not really even going to talk about it because it's done. And that, I think, we see this again and again. It's a human tendency. It's a particularly American tendency to say, oh, we fixed that. Let's move on. And because of that, we didn't keep talking about it. We didn't keep
Yeah.
talking about it. And we have a short memory span. Human
Mm-hmm.
beings have a short memory. Cultures have a
Mm-hmm.
short memory. Americans, particularly,
You know
have a
what? I
very
think
short
it
memory
was.
span.
I'm going to blame reality TV, because let me tell you, I'm a television watcher. Television's on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just yesterday, I watch 1970 TV shows all
Mm-hmm.
day. I do.
Yep.
Well, in the noon hour, because I boycott local news, so I don't
Right.
watch local news. Family Affair. Remember Buffy and
Yeah.
Jody?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I
Well,
love that show.
it's funny to me because first of all, everything that Buffy had, I got as a kid. I even had a Mrs. Beasley doll. Right?
Mrs.
So
Beasley, yeah.
every time I look at the show, I just crack up, because apparently Boomer TV, everything on Boomer TV, my mother bought it out of a catalog and everything.
Yeah.
But yesterday they had an episode. You mentioned public school and private school, and the fact that somewhere along the way the conversation stopped. Yesterday they had an episode where they were trying to decide whether or not to send Buffy and Jody to private school. because the principal did not believe Jody when Jody said he did not throw a rock and break a window, the broken window, right?
Right.
And the principal decided, well, you Mr. Bill, you've got to pay for this window. Jody had the rock in his hand, and he was like, well, Jody doesn't lie. Jody wouldn't. If Jody, saw the broken window, saw the rock, picked the rock up. So he was trying to decide if they should go to private school, and he met with one of his, friends. A lot of single women were around Mr. Bill.
Yeah, Uncle Bill had a lot of ladies
who he could conveniently take to dinner at any time. I pick up a lot from these TV shows. I'm like, she just happened to be single. They can go to dinner together. And he was asking her about the private school. So she allowed her son to come and hang out with Buffy and Jody. And he went to the neighborhood playground, the school playground. And he was having a private school education, was well aware of everybody's history. This little kid was. So when he saw all this diversity at Jody's and amongst Jody's friends, he then divulged all these little, he talked to the Asian kid about something happened in Asian history, and the Asian kid was like, what? Who? And then he talked to the black kid. I'm trying to think. He asked the black kid specifically about I don't know if it was either one of the doctors or something, and the black kid was like, who? And every kid, he talked to the girl about something about the women's lib, all of these kids. Yep. Yeah, he had full well knowledge. And they were like, and then I know what it was. He tried to speak another language. He tried to speak the Asian kids' language. The Asian kids was like, we got a Puerto Rican friend. He speaks Puerto Rican. He said, well, I don't speak Puerto Rican. He said, I thought maybe you would speak, your parents' language. He's like, no, I don't. And so it went around, and that was and this was, I guess, would have been a highly political show in that day, right? Yeah. Showing, first of all, the show having, Buffy and Jody going to school, all this diversity
to an integrated school,
in an integrated school, right? And so they ended up at the end of the day deciding that something was wrong with the kid, the private school kid, and that they should stay. Buffy and Jody should stay at the public school. And I'm like, oh man, that went away, didn't it? That went a certain way. And but yet still, I'm like, okay, but what about all of this knowledge? Like you said again, we stopped talking about a thing. We made it the norm. We normalized not knowing your history as to knowing your history. Normalized because we got to this point of where everybody needs to feel a part. Everybody needs to feel something. But we ended up, and we talk about all the time when we talk about covering, downplaying the misfavorite trait about ourselves, and basically assimilating. And what we try to do here, guys, on Wednesday is, as women, not try so much to assimilate with the men and recognize that there's some things that we should be doing as our gender. So I just thought that was interesting. In 1972, and it might even been a rerun by the time I watched it. And then I'm also binging on every episode of Mary Tyler Moore, which blows my mind. I had to sit and watch. There was an episode, Angela, where she was literally asked, because Murray was going to quit. Murray was the writer. We had Lou, station manager or whatever. You had Ted, who was the personality. You had Mary, who was the producer. And then you had Murray, who was the writer. And mind you, they had an episode where they talked about their salaries, and I fell out. I was like, oh my God. Lou actually asked Mary to share the position because Murray had gotten another opportunity. And in order to keep Murray, he wanted to make Murray a writer-producer, meaning give him some of your responsibility, Mary. We need to keep him. And he actually got her to the point where she was either going to stop being who she was. And she said, but no, I've worked hard. I came in here, But now he said, yeah, you came in here, you didn't know anything. And I gave you an opportunity. I allowed you to build,
Mm-hmm.
He's like, but now it was like, we need to save this man. He has a family.
Right.
And
He
this,
has a
that,
family. Yeah.
ooh, girl, I was all over the place. Like, Mary, don't let me down, don't let me down. And
Yeah.
it literally got to the point where she allowed some of her position, him to have
Mm-hmm.
some of her position. And at the end, I don't know if I'm hoping she finally put her foot down,
Yeah.
but still, he didn't go work somewhere else. They came to a
Right.
compromise that ended up
Right.
having her sacrifice something. Even if he decided he was going to just stay a writer, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you pulled her into
Yep.
this man's problem,
And the man who's supposed to
okay,
be her friend, Murray's supposed to be her work
they
friend,
were
right?
all friends. And at
This
one
is
time
supposed
he
to be
was
her
in
friend.
love with her. That was the
Yes.
episode of him being in love with her. I was
Yeah.
like, well, he had a whole wife and kids. I'm like,
Yeah, that Murray's story is a little shaky there. I have a whole Murray's on the down low. I mean, Murray was on the down low. Come on. I was like, hey, did we ever see
again,
his wife?
things not said. Yeah,
Yeah.
that whole
But I think I think you're really hitting on something significant, right? For our generation, right?
Mhm,
For our Gen X generation,
mhm.
we were watching these shows oftentimes. Now, Mary Tyler Moore would have been contemporaneous. Like, I think it started in 1970. 1970. I think so. I think it's 1970. So by 71, right? We're five
Yeah,
years old. I
yeah.
would remember. I remember stuff from then.
And
But
it was a staple.
a lot of these things, if we didn't see them when they were happening, we saw them in reruns, right? So we had Mary Tyler Moore. I used to love the show That Girl, right? That
Yeah,
would have
yeah,
been Family Affair. I went and looked it
yeah.
up when I think that was actually late 60s. We would have been
Late
watching reruns. But I
we
love Family
watched them
Affair.
rerun.
But
Mm-hmm.
but I was just thinking about what shows did we see
And so
that
you
showed,
froze. You froze like
oh,
mid face. All right, we'll give her a second, guys, to come back in
all
while
right.
she is getting reconnected. I'm going to tell you guys you are watching Leading Women Weekly, and we air on Wednesdays at 1:30. Let's make sure that hopefully her battery didn't. There you go. You're back. All
Am
right.
I back? Yeah, I
We
don't know
lost
what
you.
that
Look,
was.
you pulled a that girl.
I put on That Girl, and then it's froze. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
who did we see? What were the models for us, right?
But
Of
all of those
professional
shows.
women.
Yeah, but
And
all
it's
of the
like,
shows we're talking about came
mm-hmm,
in at the late 60s. We watched them because, of course, in our
yep,
time, we only had 3 channels. So
yep,
even that girl, Family Affair, even Gilligan's Island, I'm still to this day shocked that we
yep.
were watching reruns of Gilligan's Island.
I know, same. I did not realize we were watching reruns, but I was thinking about, like, for me, I was very influenced a little bit later by the
Well, we had
Bionicle
Maud. We had Maud
with Maud,
Family. We had the Jeffersons. We had Good
right?
Times.
So like,
Um,
where did we see working women, right? Well, the Jeffersons, right? We had you had
and they didn't act. The women on the Jeffersons didn't actually work. Remember, they were supposed to be
well,
volunteering.
the
Yeah.
excuse me, Marla Gibbs was
Right.
Florence was working in their home, right? So
But that
that was a
wasn't that
job.
wasn't our work
But it's
model.
true. But that
Yeah.
wasn't a work model. But that
Because
was
because Florence was in the position that Wheezy had come from.
right,
Right.
right. So, but so I'm just my one day I'm going to go through and do an analysis of all the women I saw that were professional women, because I
Mm-hmm.
knew from the time I was 5 years old that I wanted to be a career woman. My mom was a mother who of
Mm-hmm.
5 children, and I said I don't want to do that. I want to be my dad. I don't want to be my
So
mom.
who would you say?
And
So who followed Mary? Who followed Mary?
so we had Mary, Rhoda, and Phyllis all had shows, right? And now
And
I don't
they
remember.
came in back on the last episode of Mary. I
Right.
watched
And I
that.
don't remember if Phyllis was a housewife when she was on Mary Tyler Moore, but I think she got divorced. I believe that was part of the story. Uh, I would not say that Phyllis was a big influence, but there was a period there where we were seeing working women, and and this was
I'm trying
particularly
to
white
think.
women. Julia was really a
That
little
was
bit
early
before.
60s. Yeah,
That was
that was
I didn't
60s.
really see that, right? So I'm
Mm-mm.
just thinking, like, what did we see?
Well, we ended up with the onslaught of soap operas, and then we had the nighttime soap operas more so
Then
than
right.
those shows. Yeah.
And so, so some of that came in, like I said, there were
So we
some
had Dallas and
models of women,
Dynasty. Yeah.
of working women in nighttime drama. But I'm thinking, like, for us, they're informative years. And so when you talk about Mary Tyler Moore, this was a really important show. This is why Oprah talks about it. Now she's she's a solid boomer, but to see the model of what it would be like to be a career woman, at least for part of your career. Now, we didn't really have a whole lot of working moms, right? This was Julia was, that was, like I say, prior to our time. I can't think of it. They were all single women, right?
Unless we jump to the 90s shows, which was, for me, I mean, of course, Living Single,
right, living single,
um,
right? Of course, Cosby Show. No, and
but
again, we had
think
a
about Cosby Show. When Cosby Show first came on, Felicia, was the stay-at-home mom,
mhm.
and then they sent her back to school, and then she became an attorney. But what other? Wait a minute. What's the one with Michael J. Fox? That was
Family Ties.
Family Ties. We had those.
But their mom, I think the mom
Wasn't
stayed
she
home.
was she a psychologist or something?
Was
I
she?
mean,
It's so
no,
funny. I don't even remember.
that was an era of the parents having in the home
Having
offices.
an office in the house.
And
Yes.
everybody had an office
And
in the house. Yeah.
so again, that's a little later for us, right? So again, that was another model that was being presented, right? So this is
Wait a minute. Let me go over here to comments.
because then
So keep going.
there were all the lawyer shows, right? Then there were tons of lawyer shows, and where there were women lawyers. But I mean, my point is that we didn't have a whole lot of media models of what it looked like for a woman to have a career. Interestingly enough, when Grey's Anatomy hit, right, there's a whole group of women who are surgeons now who credit seeing Grey's Anatomy as inspiring them to go into medicine and be surgeons. When we had LA Law, right? When LA Law started, there's a whole generation of women lawyers, for good or for bad,
right,
who were inspired by that show to become lawyers. So, this is ER, right? Inspired nurses and doctors, female doctors. So the whole CSI movement, oh my God, made so many women want to go into forensic science. Now, in fact, they had a glut. So my point is that if we don't see it, just as human beings, if we don't see it, we may not know we can do it. And so
here we are, and we can't recall it.
We can't even recall it, but it's imprinted on us. So then I'm going to segue back, because I know it's time for Tachi, is to say, when we have real life women who've been doing every kind of thing, right, since the beginning of things, and we don't get to know their stories, then all we can go on is a fictionalized version that hopefully is close to reality. So this is where you and me and our viewers, our leading women, telling their stories is so important, and telling the stories of the women in your family, of the women that you know. This platform, this ability to be able to record yourself is really, really significant. And so, I mean, it just hits me, because I know me, so I can speak about myself, was making career decisions in my life based on a tiny sphere of influence, which was basically my mom and dad and an extended family, and then what I saw on television. I made decisions based on that, and then my religion, which is a whole nother story for another day.
What we don't recognize is that the majority of us are basing our lives on these, because remember that we were the most marketed to generation ever. So all we had was television. And the one show that we did not mention, you talk about working girls, that didn't come out right, was the Golden Girls.
And we'll loop back.
Each of them were at the end of their careers. We never saw them in their careers,
in the peak of their careers. In fact, the whole point was, again, they were our age. They were I think that the youngest one was supposed to be 54, and they're supposed to have been, trying to come up with second careers, right? But I do want to throw in there the one set of professional women that I saw in my life on a regular basis were school teachers, right? So we had teachers in our lives that were predominantly female by the time we were in school. It was a rare thing.
Did we have teacher television show? Was there a television show about a teacher?
I'm trying to think.
No, because you know what?
I know male teachers, White
Well,
Shadow.
that's what I was going to say. I mean, you and I, we talked about that a lot, is that we went through a period of television prior to coming to that era. And I'm glad we're bringing Tati on, because she actually participates in a television podcast on a regular. But remember, before coming to those boomer shows that we talked about, all of them were absent of women. The men were widows. Remember, they've been married multiple times, and they had the families and so forth. But we were talking about it. I didn't get to. I worked all day on these things here.
Yep.
And I didn't get to show them. No, but we want to get into talking about the Golden Girls reimagined that happened last night. But we're going to come back to that, because we also want to talk about how that ties into the census. So, but we want to get Tachi in, and as you can see, let me see. Wait a minute. I don't want to delete it. I want to turn it off. Let me try and turn this off. There we go. Want to bring on Dr. Shitachi Egru, because let me bring her in. She can probably help us as we talk about trying to reminisce on some of these television shows. Angela and I, Tachi, I don't know if you had a chance to really watch before coming on, but we were trying to reminisce about television shows that would have shown career women during our era. Angela and I are both in our 50s. So we are the Golden Girls of this age. But in our youth, we watched so much boomer TV in reruns. So what we're realizing is there were no shows for us in the 80s. We ended up, I don't know. We don't know what happened. We know there were a lot that came around in the 90s. Yeah. But in the 80s, like, what was the working woman show after a Mary Tyler Moore, which went off in the late 70s and reran through the 80s, you know?
That would have been like Murphy Brown.
Duh!
True. There you
go.
Oh
my God.
How do we miss Murphy Brown? That would have been late 80s. That would have been late 80s.
That would have been Murphy
late
Brown
80s.
and Cheers. And think about how much controversy Murphy Brown was.
Yeah.
To be a working woman. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's true.
Exactly.
So for us, Murphy Brown would have been once we were out of high school. So, or getting close to being, being seniors in high school. So,
well, that would have been Bush and Dan Quayle. One of the Dan Quayle things. So Bush Senior. Yeah. So we would have been in college at that time.
Yeah. So, we were just sort of piecing together and saying in the absence of the stories of real women, right? We've been talking sort of about the hidden figures of history, right? When we don't get to hear those stories, then basically we're having to make it up for particularly our generation, made it up from what we saw on television and then the stories in our family and community, right? And so the women around us, so depending on what we saw modeled there, and then it was just the stories of TV. And so, it's like, where were the working moms? Where were the older women? So that came as we aged. We saw more of that. But the power of that and the importance and significance of using these platforms to record our own current narratives, right? Because I'm 54. The youngest Golden Girl I believe was supposed to be Rose, was supposed to be 54, right? So my God, thank God 54 is different now than then.
Oh my God.
They were supposed to be over, right? And I'm like, crap, I'm a Golden Girl. So, to say that was our model for aging. This is my model of what it was like to at least be a feisty old lady, right? And now that I'm there, I'm like, well, hell, I ain't even got started good. So, these things really matter. And so now I don't have to look to the Golden Girls. I can look at real women.
And can I just tell y'all, Angela is not a Rose. That is not Rose right there.
Not Rose.
No, I would not Betty White. But think about it. I mean, you think about all of the television that we watch. I mean, Betty White was there through it all. I mean, she was on Mary Tyler Moore. She was a large part of, was that everything that I just said just went off? Betty White was the large part of all of the women that we saw throughout the generation. So, you said Murphy Brown, and then of course we had the Cosby Show. So we had Felicia Rashad, so we saw the evolution of her. So those are the two women that we had. One having a family, and then of course Murphy Brown being the career woman who then ended up being the single mom, having a child alone. And that America was like, no, you're not gonna take us there, even though it was a large part of where women actually were. You know, so but let's get Tati in here, because Tati, now you do participate in a television podcast, and you guys got to do something really great for Chadwick Boseman. You guys talked about sci-fi. You're on a sci-fi podcast, right?
Yeah, I'm on several. So I have I'm on something called Sci-Fi Saturdays. I'm the resident doctor. It mimics the set of kind of like Star Trek. So we have everybody on the deck, and I'm the doctor.
So you're the bones. Organic McFadden.
But tell us quickly though a little bit about what you guys did do for Chadwick Boseman, because you guys were able to immediately talk about his career and so forth.
Well, so we do it bi-weekly, and we actually do it live generally, but because of COVID, we haven't been doing it like in person, where we broadcast it and we're also together in person, and we have audience there too, like locally in South Florida. Wow. So we haven't done that since March. So when we were looking for a way to do it, I'm like, oh, I can run it, whatever. So I run it that way. So what we done is actually now turn this into this kind of like what you guys are doing now, as opposed to just in person. And you generally meet every other week, the first and the third Saturdays. And so that was not a third Saturday, but as soon as we heard the news, we all got on the phone and said, do we want to wait for our normal day to do it, or do we want to do something tomorrow? We all said, let's do it tomorrow. So really quickly, in about 15 minutes, we got together what we were going to talk about. I came up with a flyer, we put it out there, and we said, well, whoever comes. And it ended up being really nice. So it was just a reminiscing about the life and the work of Chadwick Boseman. I actually was on the same campus, but I went to Howard University as well. So we were at Howard at the same time, though we didn't know each other. And we graduated the same time, though we didn't know each other. So,
Wow. And what's it's Sci-Fi Saturdays, and we can catch it, you said first and third?
First and third Saturdays on the Sci-Fi Saturdays Facebook page.
Okay.
And so
no, go ahead. One more.
Well, we're looking to constantly expand and constantly do things. The whole name is actually Sci-Fi Saturdays with Keith C. Wade, who is a local actor and just person extraordinaire. So they wrangled me in. So I said, all right.
Now, is that Keith from Meerkat?
No. Keith is an actor here in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area.
Okay.
So,
all right. So, well, let me tell you guys, one of the reasons we wanted to bring Tati on is, one, we saw something amazing last night, and everybody's trying to figure out what that was, because it went out, they did a PR package, and everybody was thinking, oh, wait, they're getting ready to redo the Golden Girls. It's going to be an all-black cast, and so I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about the Oscars, because the Oscars are now awarding diversity. The criteria has changed, and if we were still out and about, a lot of films will be qualifying right now for the upcoming Oscars, and so I want to figure out where that is going. But let's talk about this, and I'm going to cover us up here, guys. Just 1 minute again, bring it back on the screen. Did you watch the Golden Girls reimagined? It's something they call Zoom Where It Happens. Angela, you went and got some of the backstory. This was the first episode. I was like, wait a minute. It's in partnership with Zoom. It's in partnership with Color of Change. And because people were like, wait, why would they do an all-black cast? But if you have ever wanted to experience, Tati, you said it was like a table read.
Yeah, a live table read.
So now, Angela, they hit some pretty interesting numbers.
Yes.
What did this look like? And give us a little bit of background, and then we'll let Tati explain to us what we watched.
Right. Well, considering that they seem like they put it together pretty fast, because I'd only been seeing about it for a couple of days. I don't know that I was not able to find out when they decided to do it, right? But I saw it on Tracy Ellis Ross's Twitter feed, right? So I figure when she must have posted it, like I saw the post had been up for a few minutes. So that was a couple of days ago. I think that was probably pretty much when they started promoting it. They had over 100,000 RSVPs. Zoom can only handle 50,000. They maxed out 50,000 live viewers.
Wow.
So I mean that was really incredible. And and obviously, when I saw it, I'm like, well, what you don't have to pay for it. What is the point? And I'm like, this is a political outreach, right? So Color of Change, particularly being the sponsor of it, is to raise awareness of really specific. They keyed in on 3 specific issues: the census, voter registration, and then volunteering to be a poll worker. And so I thought, was a very effective use, and I'm sure Tachi can get more into this as well, of taking influencers, bringing them together. And then Yolanda, you're the one that pointed out to me that if you invited people, so as soon as you sign up, you get an email that says invite your friends. That if you invited people, you found out who was invited, right? So now not only do they have a way for influencers to nudge their communities on these topics, they now have a rapid response list. So as we get closer, and it was Tracy Ellis Ross who said, if you haven't done your census, do it now, because they've been moving this. I've been following Hansi Lo Wang from NPR talking about the census. They're screwing with it every minute, right? So they're like, so if something comes up, not just census, voter registration, whatever, they now have this Color of Change now has this incredible list of influencers who they know, not just your major influencers, but down to micro influencers, to be able to reach out into networks very quickly. So, I mean, I was just like, this is an amazing thing that, again, does not seem like it was not months or weeks. It was days of promotion, and suddenly you've got over 100,000 RSVPs. Who knows how many on top of that were contacted and will be now part of that outreach community. So, but now that's my backstory.
Now think about this. I don't know how that all came together. And you said, and think about it. They only took a matter of days to promote this thing. Because I'm gonna tell you, when I saw it, I jumped in on it because Bevy Smith posted it, and when I responded to her tweet or went to retweet, it had only been posted 4 minutes. Okay, and there I was like, "Ooh, I got to get in on this. What is this?" Because I had seen it a couple places, but then once I saw that influencer say that, "Hey, this is something. Let me really look at it, and really send it out." But now when you think about it, and this is what I want Tasha to help us to understand, because oftentimes we see these things and we think that they just pop up and capitalize on this, that, and the other. There had to be some amount of rehearsal, right? Because they had wardrobe change. They were not only just reading the script. Tachi, tell us though, because they did it in the style of, you said, a table read. So what actually went on with this as a production? What went on here?
From what, again, I don't know. I wish I had the honor of being involved in such a feat, but I did not. But it was basically like a live table read. So in the absence of having a stage, and they put this together, as you said, fairly quickly, it looks like, because for people to be able to be that coordinated, and they're in 5 different places, right? Or 6, because you have to count Jesse Williams, who came in from another place.
Yes.
They had to make sure that everybody had that same background. So there are tech things that they had to think about as well. But really, they probably put this together. It had to have been within the past 2 weeks. We're giving them a couple of days, but it may have been up to 2 weeks. So they had to look through these things, familiarize themselves. I'm sure everybody who's a Golden Girls fan has seen that episode. Yes. I recognized it right away when it came on. But there were some costume changes, albeit very light. There are things that you have to do to capture the spirit of the characters. And so I think they did, phenomenally well. So obviously, I don't know that they committed everything to memory. I know that they had some script or teleprompting to help them along as well. I'm sure they did, but I think it went off phenomenally well. So this was.
Let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
let me ask you this, because trying to get and I don't know if how you guys are discussing it on the film circuit. And Tati is also a filmmaker. When the audience has been saying, just come to us, just give us something, just a little bit. And everybody's like, well, no, it's got to be at this level and it's got to be this, that, and the other. Now we are seeing verses, and verses has grown, mind you. But it started out, hey, listen, just push the button, just turn on the camera, just keep the audience engaged. Okay, Broadway is not happening. Movies are not happening. You've got to do something in the meantime because people are truly salivating. We're talking about 100,000 RSVP. I don't know who at any level has been able to gather 100,000. Trying to get them to understand on a virtual level, this is the capacity. If they had not done a Zoom, they did it in a Zoom, 50,000 max, you said. If they had done it on a YouTube in a live or this, that, and the other, they could have doubled that. But they needed to capture the data. So they had to do it in that sense. You wouldn't have been able to capture the kind of data that they capture. So we're not going to be mad at that by them not just going live, and letting me screen capture that. Couldn't screen capture this thing. I did. I screen captured it. It had no audio.
Wow. See?
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So there was still that level of protecting the artists because, depending on what association the artist is in that are participating. So there still was that level of protection. There was a level of data. But Tachi, how do we get, because let me tell you, I tried to do my own Netflix. I tried to go to filmmakers and say, hey, listen, 20 years ago, hey guys, I think we can do online screening. And people still are not there yet to understanding the respectability of what can be accomplished in this medium because they continue to think that, well, if I go live with you guys online, it's going to end what we're trying to do over here. And they don't understand it doesn't end. One medium does not end another medium. It's just another layer. This is just simply another layer. How do we get filmmakers to understand that? It's like, I know you're going to do your movie, but in the meantime, let's do a table read.
It comes with having a complexity of thought that, frankly, a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
When you have a system that preaches this is the only way your stuff can get seen. It has to be shown here, then it has to be shown here, then it has to be put in for consideration here. And when everybody falls in line, that almost precludes everybody else from being in on it, which is why you have the same 10 people that do everything in Hollywood or elsewhere all the time. However, it's starting to change because of the advent of technologies like live streaming platforms, etc. And the pandemic, you can't get together because there are strict rules in terms of what you can do in terms of work and rules for in the coronavirus era. So you can't have a whole bunch of people on set. So you have to find ways to do production at a distance. And this has come about. So unfortunately, these things only tend to come about through necessity. But what is it going to take? I think people, those of us who already understand these technologies, really getting in on the game ourselves and producing more. I mean, we're already producing a lot, but producing more, producing on a regular basis, producing like what you all are doing every Wednesday at this time, you're doing, making sure people know. So when you mimic what is already a pattern that audience members are used to, they're going to come. They're going to come. The one here and there, the off and the sporadic, which is what, by the way, a lot of celebrities who are doing things like Instagram Live, etc., are doing. A lot of them are not doing it on a set schedule. It's like whenever they feel like. Well, people only get to know who you are when you are consistent with what you do. Your celebrity only lasts for a little while. That's only cool every once in a while. So I'm not going to drop everything all the time to come and see you. But if I have an appointment with you, every Wednesday at XYZ time, I'm going to be there because I know that's my thing. So I think it's going to take those of us who know, educating the people who don't know into the salience and the wonderful opportunities that these present, and that it does not preclude traditional media. Traditional media shifts because of this, definitely, but it doesn't go away.
Well, let me ask you this. Would Mulan not be in the controversy that they're having now if they had done something in between, the release of that. It's like, whoa, everybody saw that, because like how are films, how are productions still getting it wrong? I saw a little bit of the controversy about Mulan, and there was a lot of disappointment over the film, but then there's also some political stuff. If they had just allowed people a glimpse into it before the thing, could they have gotten in front of it? Would it allow them people to start getting in front of what ends up being controversy, what ends up being backlash?
Can
if
you?
they had some, that's that. I mean, that's what I'm asking. Can you? I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we sell them on the fact that we need something before a thing? It's like, I don't know. Go ahead.
So when you say something before that, are you saying something as an interim? Are you saying a sneak peek? What exactly do you mean?
Yeah, like a sneak peek, the whole behind the scenes. Because here's where we are. I still go back to like the DVD. Remember, there was so much information on a DVD, right? Mm-hmm. Once you got the DVD, you got inside the director's head, you got inside the things that were on the cutting room floor, the extra scenes, the alternate endings. And you don't get that now because everything is, it's streaming. And now when you go to watch things, you may get some little extras, but it just feels like we're missing something because people are so totally afraid of the medium. They're still afraid of somebody going behind a curtain, a wall, or what. I don't know. I just get a sense of there's still a lot of fear out there as to what this medium could be, simply because of maybe what happened to the music industry, what happened in newspapers, but they didn't go forth into technology. They fought it. They fought it, and they lost their audiences. They lost their companies, their billions, and so forth. I just want movies and whatever's to come at this point, because we haven't even had innovation. And I'm more than movies. I'm more concerned about theater. I'm more concerned about theater because there's still some authenticity to theater and stage. Because if you think about how much CGI and all of that is in a movie now, they're not even doing as much. But when you think about stage, I'm so concerned about stage. Had they done more of these, they do table reads. Like I would go to something local here for a reading and whatnot. But I just feel like they're missing this mark. Anybody who's decided they're not going to do anything in 2020 because of where we are, they're missing it. Because now is the time more than ever to grow your audience.
This may sound callous, and I would say this: it's like, I know you all think I don't want people to win. I really do want people to win, but I can't help you if you don't want to help yourself. Yeah. This is what you should have been working on. Right. Even though, Broadway, they've always had their ups and downs, and they've had great years. But when Hamilton came about, that's when you really started to have a resurgence in the in the interest in going to live theater. And it's like, okay, I can't get into Hamilton, but what else is there? There's a whole bunch of Broadway and off-Broadway stuff, and it really did. But you can't leave it there. If you're not looking into the future, nobody foresaw this happening, but you have to say to yourself, well, what if for some reason people can't get here? How can we bring it to them? What can we do? How can we do these things live? This should have been a conversation well before now. So I can help you if you don't want to help yourself.
And Tachi, I'm so with you on this, because I'm thinking about my own personal interest in theater and like Broadway theater, right? I've been to very few Broadway shows in my life that in New York. I'm traveling. But when Sunday in the Park with George wasn't live stream, it was recorded and played on PBS. And I believe that was sometime in like 84, 85. It was right when I was graduating from high school. And I still consider that to be one of the greatest collaborative pieces of art of our modern time. That cast, that production was just incredible. And I'm like, oh my God, I would, if I had a way at 18 to get to New York to see it, I would have. It made me want to see more live Broadway shows. And so I know I'm one person, but I'm going to go with this, that the majority of people, when they see the recording, it makes them want to go. It will actually let them know that they would enjoy going to the live show, right? So I'm with you on that. They've known. And in fact, I just read a thing that the New York City Public Library, I think it is, has thousands of recordings. They record every Broadway production since the beginning of time, but they won't release them.
Yeah, yeah. I think also the Library of Congress has this as well. So, you've got two huge resources and this is the time, to release them, to do something with them. I think it should be compulsory that any play, any big Broadway production also needs to be shot in a way that it can be repurposed later. If you think about let's take Beyonce and what she did with Homecoming.
Yes.
During the process of Coachella, not only was it filmed for Coachella, but she had her own crew filming because they knew they were going to turn this into something. So I think that's how you have to think. You have to think multi-platform. You have to think multi-layered. It can't just be about getting people in seats in a theater on Broadway or the Pantages Theater or any of these things. You've got to think beyond that. And I'm hoping now that not just theater, but also the television, also film especially, because they're an industry, the exhibition industry does not want to change. They're pushing for openings of things. I'm like, do you know if I own, but everybody doesn't do what I do. But if I owned a theater chain, one of the largest theater chains, I would have by now released swag, had a partnership to release swag. I would have had theater boxes full of theater style candy and special things. You should have been having subscription, but there's no reason that your livelihood is tied to the fact that I buy a ticket. And here's the thing, it actually is not. Most of the money in a theater is made from concessions. Their major amount of money is concessions. Why are you not capitalizing on that? I am blown.
Share those, like you say, sell those $10 boxes of M&Ms, and people would be like, "Yay! I've got my movie candy."
And a lot of people.
That's so smart, Tachi.
Some movie theaters did do the drive up to get the theater boxes and so forth. I know here. Remember, Walmart is also doing the drive in, and then also here in Atlanta, somebody's producing drive-in concerts, right? So people are capitalizing on it, but the people that are capitalizing on it are only capitalizing on it because those who should be doing it are not doing a thing.
Right. AMC, Regal, and Cinemark are not capitalized. They are the three largest theater chains. They are not capitalizing off of it. So that's why you had Tribeca team up with Walmart and they did the drive-in movies. That's why you have all these different entities that are doing it, except the ones that you thought theoretically should. I mean, even with the popcorn thing, right? That's a huge movie theater snack. There's a theater down the street. It's an independent theater, the Gateway. Their popcorn is the absolute best. Sometimes I'll be there, "Oh, you here to see a movie?" "No, I just came to get popcorn." I'm not even there to see a movie. So when you see things like that, that's when the light bulbs need to go off if you intend to be here for the next, however many years.
I mean, who hasn't walked up to the movie theater and asked the usher, "Can I just run to the concession stand? I'm not here to see the movie. I just want to run and get something from the concession stand." Who has not done that? That's crazy.
Exactly.
Well, and Dr. Tachi, I just learned the term this morning of what you're describing. It's called the monogamy of solutions. So the monogamy of solutions, and it's been applied to our to the American approach to coronavirus and COVID, is that we only want to do one thing. It's like we can't multitask and we can't look at multiple solutions. So when you're talking like it's the monogamy of solutions, well, we're a movie theater, and if you can't come into the movie theater, then we're just going to close and hope that we don't go out of business. And it's like it's so stupid. It's so stupid, but it's like I'm like, oh my God, we're doing with this industry what we're doing with COVID is we can. It's like we'll only do one thing at a time, right? And then if that thing doesn't work, right, or isn't the end all be all solution, we say, oh, it doesn't work, right? So, well, this doesn't solve all my problems, well, I'm not going to do it. Instead of saying we should be doing 10 things all the time. and
Right.
they support one another, right? And I
Mhm,
thought this
mhm.
is this is a failure of critical thinking and a failure of imagination. I will go to my grave, may it be a long, long time from now, saying the thing that was struck me the most is how the lack of imagination on the part of people who were in power and had the ability to have solutions. That they just couldn't imagine anything outside of their boxes. And so they will steal from the people who do have imaginations, which is
Mhm.
sad. But at least
Right.
now, if you've got any kind of imagination, this is the time. Do your
Right.
thing. Go for it. Because because there is just the people at the top just cannot imagine anything other than here's how we've been doing it. They're so rigidly stuck in structures and and rules or whatever, that they are missing the innovation of what all
Mhm.
these industries are going to look like in the next 5, 10, 50 years. We're looking
Yeah.
at
Exactly.
this
Because
was coming.
people are talking about how many of these different aspects will never go away. Like certain parts of this that even though we open back up and everything goes back to normal or traditionally, that some of these aspects will always be there. And I mean, and what better way for us to learn than through the movie industry? Because if you look at all the different levels of production, you always, even though you finish a movie, you always got to have something else started. All right, another
Mhm.
reason I wanted Dr. Tachi to come on with us because Oscars have changed. They're going to be awarding some diversity. Now, if you're going to be going up on that stage, you got to learn to look around in the room and make sure that you are inclusive in your productions of in the writing, and not just in front of the camera, but also behind it, and not even in front of the camera and behind the camera in other aspects of a film. You know, when we talk about Hamilton, Hamilton is, I didn't even realize Hamilton had been out as long as it has. And if you look at Hamilton, how long it has been a leader on Broadway, we still have not, and you and I talk about this all the time, we still have not seen, the change that we should have seen. But now that the Oscars are saying, hey, listen, we're tired of being Oscar so white or Oscar so this, that, and the other. Tachi, what are we seeing? And you also mentioned, as you and I were talking earlier, that some of the criteria has changed in order to be considered. I can't imagine what the next award show is going to look like. But what's the first thing? What do they mean by they inclusive? What does it mean to have a more inclusive film now?
So, first of all, I'm for abolishing the show, the televised Oscars and awards, all because I've had it. That's enough. You can do a red carpet, but then you know what? Take that online. To me, it eats up 3 hours of time I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to get back. Even though this is my field, I could do without it. And it's not for us; it's for them. It really
Yeah.
is for them to recognize themselves. And they figured out we can make money through advertising because everybody wants to see us, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
keep looking at your ratings. So, this is what this means. Let me get you. So in June, you know that they added an additional 819 new members to the Academy. Okay. 45% of them were women and 36% were people of color. So this shows that the Oscars has, the Academy in general, because I know this is going to filter down to the Television Academy as well, has a huge stake in diversity now, right? So you now have to have diversity as part, or diversity and inclusion, whatever that means, as part of your film, both above the line, right, and below the line, if you are going to be considered for the Oscars. So there are 2 of 4 benchmarks. They include actors, and I'm reading this so that I have this right. You have to have featured actors from underrepresented groups in significant roles or accounting for at least 30% of the cast. And the same thing is for the people working in the film behind the scenes or above the line. Okay. The significant commitment to paid apprenticeships internships and career development, and a significant representation among the teams devoted to marketing, publicity, and distribution. So what people don't realize sometimes is they see a film, they think actors, but it's not only actors, it's not only directors, the producers, there's the set people, the costume people, there are the people, the PR people, the publicity people, all the way to, it's like the fashion industry, down to the people that manufacture the buttons, right? In the fashion industry. There are all facets involved in the film industry. And so you're looking and it's like, great, you added two more, you added a Latinx actor and an Asian actor. But what good is it if all the writers are, still white? What good is it if everybody that's involved in the PR are still white? At the end of the day, I don't think that people realize it's not, inclusion is not just because you want to see your face. Now, representation matters because it lets people know that this is something that is possible, but it's also about building generational wealth, right? If you are excluded from certain factions of society, that excludes you from participating in the American wealth system. So it's basically barring you from building wealth. So that's the bigger thing here, where people are like, well, what does it matter? Because it matters, because same thing with Black-owned businesses. Why does that matter? Because that's the way you build generational wealth. I have nothing to pass down to the next generation, and they become locked in the system when that happens. So it's a bigger thing than just seeing yourself on screen.
Okay.
No, absolutely. And, I was just thinking about Mulan. You're talking about Mulan and, the controversy, that I say there's so many controversies around Mulan now, right?
Yes.
Had they just let people stream it with Disney Plus, just, anecdotally, I know a lot of people, myself included, who would have watched it because like, oh, Mulan, before knowing any controversy, right? They could have had so many viewers. And before they got snared in this controversy. Now, that's not saying that they shouldn't have done it right in the first place, but they have done themselves in about 10 different ways from my point of view. But that there is a woman director, which is great, and a female cinematographer, that's great, but there's no one Asian. You've got this Asian story, and there's no one Asian they say above the line in the director, writer, producer, nothing. There's no Asian contribution. So how are you going to have this story and not have any, of course, yes, everybody in it is of Asian descent, but if they're performing material that was not influenced by anyone of an Asian background, then you are going to have problems. And so now that people have had a little bit of a lag before watching it, it gave the people who are looking at, critiquing this critically, examining it to say, hey guys, this, plus it was filmed in a bad region of China, plus the actors are pro police in Hong Kong, boom, boom, boom. And I tell you that Disney let that get away from them, when it all could have been, maybe not all of it, but a lot of it would have been addressed had you just had an Asian writer. You can't have one Asian writer on Mulan, right?
I know. I'm still on the part when Tachi broke it down to generational wealth. It's like, and it comes down to we keep having this information released about how much people are making. We only talk about on the actor level, and getting their worth. And I don't know, Angela, I think you tagged me and was it a tweet, and who was it you asked me about? We watched something, and somebody, we said that they did well, and I said, well,
Journey Smollett.
Okay. Journey Smollett is a hellified actress, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, and they are a family in this business, okay?
Yes.
Journey Smollett has been in one, and I want to call it a failed project because her projects haven't been failed, but they've all ended, okay? Due to the ownership, due to the writing, due to what you're saying is above the line and below the line. She underground. I mean, she brought so much to the film, to the series Underground, in all her films and things like that. And Angela was like, "Oh my God, I'm loving Journey." And what is the
Lovelace
show?
Country.
Lovecraft. Lovecraft Country.
Okay, we call it Lovelace. Lovecraft. Yes.
Lovecraft and this thing is amazing. I said, but I guarantee you, because now the articles are out about what she has made on all these different projects, and they always come out saying the person is now speaking out. When you talk about generational wealth, And when you look at how many people in her family, like her brother had the controversy and was in the other TV show. What's the show, y'all? You can tell. Look, we
Empire.
Empire, right?
Tell
But
we're,
now
we can tell
imagine-
we're 50.
Right. Imagine, and Tasha don't want to be included in here with us, but just imagine him having to walk away from Empire. But imagine him having to walk away from Empire. Now they can get him off screen, but depending on how many other times his name is in the credit, he still could be making money off of that. And think about how much of a talented family, because they even once had a TV show where they all were
what
on,
is it called? The 10 of us or something like
10 of
that.
Us.
Something, yeah.
I'm telling you. So when you think about again that generational wealth, we're too often happy that Journey's in this series, but we never think about, and this is the conversation. This is why we have Leading Women Weekly. Let's check in. It's like, okay, now let's make sure that she's appearing several times in those credits, because she's bringing it. She's getting us to watch this thing, and
she's making that
we're on
show.
the screen. She's making the show, but she makes every show that she's in. She makes every show from the childhood, Eve's Bayou. When people talk about how iconic Eve's Bayou was, you think about this little girl, and in the show, it's actually what Eve's Bayou is about. What's going on in the minds of this little girl and the relationships that she has with the people in her family. So she's tied to so many projects, even the Tyler Perry one. She really brought it in that as much as you can in a Tyler Perry production. But at the same time, if this show ended, if they had to stop, it's like, where's the generation? What can the next generation take from all the work that this phenomenal woman is doing? We just got to make sure, we got to demand that as an audience, We've got to get to that point, because I think what happens is when these people get in the room and get to the table, the one caveat they have is they said, well, the audience doesn't care.
Right.
It doesn't matter. We can show this and we can show that. That's not what we don't want you just putting things out there and attending to our habits, but we got to make sure that there's some legacy to this, and particularly as we bring it back to leading women and gender specific, we've got to make sure. I mean, Tati has me now, and let me tell you, one thing I can do, I can break down the dollar of a movie. And I've always broken down the dollar of a movie because I always had to explain to my community, try to explain to my community how we can raise money in other ways. And I always use movies as an analogy. But now, when I can sit here and say, man, I never thought about it that way. Tati, when you was breaking down, when you said generational wealth, I'm like, man. So when you think about it, and I mean, I know somebody that has created amazing wealth. Not Rob Hardy, the other one, Will Packer.
Will Packer, yeah.
I was the blogger doing some of their first interviews. I could call these gentlemen up, and when I think about the amount of wealth that they have right now, simply because wanting to own, wanting to make sure the face is all throughout the production. Yeah, there's some things that they have to do in order to survive in Hollywood, in order to get the screens. I've talked with a lot of these people, and I go into getting this conversation out of them. There are things you have to do to get the screens and all of that, and to get the film distributed and and get the money and invested. But one, I think Will Packer was probably the only one. I won't say only one. Will and Wayans, Marlon, talking with them, they're the only two in all of the Hollywood people that I have talked to over the past 20 years that talked about getting the money to create the project. Not just being on screen, not just being at handling things at the box office end, but really understanding getting the money to be the creative.
And I think there are a couple of things here. First, going back to Mulan and not having a damn Asian person involved in the in that whole thing. There is a particular way and a particular thing of storytelling. So Asian cultures, just like, so I'm African, and most African cultures are high context, and that's Asian cultures as well. And that means that in order you understand things just because you're a member of the culture. Things don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
explained to you. So there's a
Oh.
big difference behind somebody who's Asian, who is of the culture, and I don't have to explain every little thing, than somebody who is not of the culture, and I'm
Mhm.
constantly explaining things, and you still don't get it right. So
Yeah.
that's a huge thing. So I think, culturally, there's a big thing for it as well. And that also goes to the fact of not having anybody as heads of studios, or you don't have diversity at that level, at the administrative level, at the executive level. That's a problem. And that's why these decisions are made that are not beneficial to the images of people of color, because you have nobody at the table that looks like us. So you're making decisions based off of what you think, not what actually is so. So that's a huge problem. But
And
then
we
the other
talk
end
about
of that,
Go ahead.
sorry. Well, the other end of that is then, okay, well, we've seen this. So what do we do now? We also need to start to look at creating our own, but not just creating our own. The distribution is the thing that matters here. So it's great that, for example, Tyler Perry has that wonderful studio in Atlanta, the largest studio owned by an African American. It's the largest studio now that exists in the
Period.
U.S.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the largest studio, period. And he's the first studio owned by an African American. And that's great. But he's not a distributor. At the end of the day, he or she that controls the distribution also controls the money and where it goes. So we also need to look at how do we, aside from the acting, all the way at the acting end, how do we now get into distribution so that we're a major player in distribution? The power lies there as well.
Yeah, and that's so important. That's one of the reasons why I named my company Distributions, because we've got to. I mean, because I knew that's where. And one of the when I put out the topic for today, I wanted to say, "Are we damned?" But not like in the sense of damned, meaning that what is this blockage? There is a blockage when it comes to women in doing this. And one of the blockages that I discovered very early on when I decided, I want to own a media publication, it has to be distributed. And there were no outlets of distribution. I had to create my channel of distribution. And when I created my channel of distribution, everybody else was like, oh, well, can I go down that stream with you as well? There were others looking for that and you realize logistics and distribution is where the money. I mean, you think about Oprah's success, Oprah created all of those, the Oprah Winfrey Show. That was a mere product in trying to get people to understand that each of those episodes were then sold around the world through distribution channels. One of the things with Tyler Perry, and people always think that we're bashing or knocking Tyler Perry, and you can't. I mean, the man's a billionaire right now at the level to what he is doing. However, his biggest complaint is that his projects, even though he has now been able to build a studio, he still can't get the distribution deals that he wants. He is now signed on to do distribution with BT, the BT streaming, and he created all these projects. There are people around the world that he still wants to see Medea. Okay, and Medea, he's been out 20 years as Medea, and he still is going to the table trying to get the distribution for Medea that he would love in order for Medea to go around the world, because those who control the distribution channels will say no, are still saying no. Nobody wants to see. Still telling this man nobody wants to see that he has become a billionaire and built a studio, right? But people are still telling him no. Every time a movie comes out, Tyler Perry himself has to go on the press junket. Okay, you've not seen any of the other studio on. When did you think about of all the studios? Beyond Lionsgate. Let's go back. We were talking about the Boomer generation, the Silent generation. Metro Goldwyn and Myers. You never see them have to go out and push their movies, right? The movies that they produce and so forth. Because this man is still being told no. We laughed at a headline that came out yesterday. It said Tyler Perry did 19 episodes in 4 days. Okay, that might be a possibility.
You know, though, I'm wondering, though, and I'm asking the two of you, you may know better than I, how much that there is an aspect, of course, of he has to go out and do things himself, but how much of that is also his personality? Because we're talking about a man who
Yes.
writes all the damn
large.
shows himself,
Yeah.
which I don't think is very smart, but who am
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
live, I don't have $1 billion. But
Well, having done the best Tyler Perry interview ever, okay,
okay,
it is a very large part of his personality.
okay.
It is a very large part of his personality because when you talk, because just as we just had that conversation about having people above the line, below the line, and keeping others out of generational wealth. Yes, Tyler Perry has created generational wealth. There are a number of people that have worked for Tyler Perry that they didn't create, the doors went open. I mean, when you heard this man, you talk about backlash. When he said that he wrote all of those episodes, people and there's no writing room. I don't know what kind of response he was expecting from that, but everybody's like, "What the hell do you mean you are not hiring writers?" I mean, that was the only thing, and that's why I said that's a very large part of his personality. That is problematic.
If we're talking about preventing generational wealth.
He makes iconic television that's going to be seen again and again and again. And if he is the only writer, he is the only one creating what Tachi has let us know, that generational wealth. I have interviewed people, Kim Fields and her mother. A lot of people don't know, and I'm pretty sure they seem not to want people to know. But Kim Fields and her mother directed a lot of his Atlanta projects. That Kim Fields and her mother would rotate as directors. And I remember I was at one of the film breakfasts and I was interviewing Kim on Periscope. And everybody attached to a Tyler Perry project have this answer. We just do what Tyler writes. That was her. I was like, well, how is it directing for Tyler? We just direct what Tyler writes. That's all they say.
And so
it's just a job. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. When I see that, I'm like, okay. On one end, you applaud because of everything that he's been able to do. On the other end, you're critical because of the opportunities he's preventing. Do you know how many young people, particularly young Black women and men, that come out of college, out of these screenwriting programs that are looking for? That could be the incubator for them to go on and do other projects. I mean, you really need to take them on. And I know his thing was, well, because, people weren't writing it the way I envisioned or so I just decided to write it myself. But when did you become the king of writing? I'm not saying you can't write, but guess what? He writes that show Sisters, which is about millennial African-American women. You are not a millennial, nor are you an African-American woman. What the hell do you know about that? You don't. So, I mean, you have to stay in your lane sometimes. That's the problem sometimes with not staying in your lane. I'm not saying that it cannot become your lane by taking on. You can still write for it. Make sure you have other writers around you who do understand so they can say, we wouldn't say that. Because I look at the show sometimes, I'm like, they don't say that. Whatever did say that. Yeah. So, it's a catch-22 in his case.
I'm thinking it's more than a catch. It's a damn. And I want us. I wanted to introduce. I want us to introduce that this week. It's a damn. We keep running into these dams, and where people have just built up and not letting anything through. And we get a lot of pushback from the audience side of it. But we're here trying to have a conversation beyond, as Angela and I always say, intended audiences. This is beyond Angela. And I know you are pressed for time. Are you at 3 or can we go?
Yeah, we can go
over?
a few minutes. Yeah, I can go a few minutes over.
We'll go a few minutes over. Just kind of wrap this up. I'm not going to try to keep going because I want you guys to come back and I want Tachi to come back. But just, to wrap up, leading women. When we started out talking about Kamala, and people were like, well, Kamala can't be the first. And so finally they took us back to Charlotta, right? But it went somewhere along the way, those stories got quiet. Like, how did we not live our entire lives? Our entire lives, y'all. We as women have been walking around here not knowing that there was this other woman who burst open the ceiling, the door, and everything else as a Black female candidate for vice president. We know we had Shirley Chisholm, but why are we getting just the one story? How do we? Because there are dams everywhere, and I want us to become some dam bursters. Okay.
Yes.
Also, Lenora Falani. She ran for president in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
See, exactly. We got to be. Can I borrow your phrase, Tachi? Tachi has a phrase. Be more.
Please do.
Okay. Be more. I want you guys to follow that. Do you have a regular schedule for that? I know you're dropping those like Beyonce. Where you come on and talk about be more. So tell us.
Yeah.
Definitely tell us about that, and then we'll get ready to get out.
So Be More is part of the Mediascope family of things that I do. And that's basically where I'm teaching people to be better. So the concept of is more than, leveling up, smarter, nicer, because there's so many things during this pandemic that are offered for free, etc. That how very dare you come out of this a worse person than you were coming in. That makes no sense. So our mantra is to be more because one day on the show I was like, damn it, just be more so that became a thing. And so that I usually do one every week. I'm trying to be more solid in schedule about when I do it, because Mediascope is Wednesdays. This is this day. So I'm like trying to fit in where I can put that. But basically what I'm doing is teaching people to be more with video, right? Also social media comes in there as well. There's no reason. I'm still seeing terrible video. What is this now? 5 months into the pandemic, and people were distancing, and so you have to broadcast from home. Why am I still seeing 2 miles of space above your head when you're broadcasting? You've had 5 months to fix this. Why am I still hearing the echo of the room? You've had 5 months to fix this. But if I'm going to levy allegations at you, then I also need to find a way to give you to fix it. So that's what.
And it's absolutely awesome. Hopefully, I meet with your approval. I know I'm still a little bit to the side of my video, only because I'm still hoping to be able to put things there. I'm using my headphone. I'm still trying to figure out the whole mic situation, but one, because my Wi-Fi goes crazy when I try to bring in other things. So, and I know you said, as long as I can hear you and see a little bit or see, I'm working on it. But
and it's also, you guys live in Georgia. And so you have trees that block every single signal that tries to make you look right. So I understand. So there are some, in coming weeks, I will talk about some, ways of boosting signal, etc. It's really, for you, it's like a nature thing. And you can't, there's not a whole lot you can do.
It truly is. If you look at Google where I'm situated, and like I said, I downsized, and I did not think about, and I thought about it, but I didn't think about the internet. It was like, wait, you mean I only have one internet choice? I'm literally 3 miles from my old home, and I'm like, it's a world apart. It's an absolute world apart. So for somebody who broadcasts as much as I do, I am wearing old school phones here. None of my Wi-Fi. I had to go out and get a cord for my printer. I can even put the printer on Bluetooth. It's like,
right. Those are considerations. Those are considerations. And
yeah.
in fact, you've given me another thing to think about in terms of the next Be More. That's something to think about. I'm living in South Florida, the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. That's not necessarily something that's a huge concern, but I am also going to get something up there in Atlanta because, I do an awful lot of production up there. So that's going to be a huge consideration. But when I am where I stay, usually there's always a problem wherever I am. And that's like in South Atlanta. I'm like, okay, when I get something, it's going to have to be in the middle of the city because I know that I need that good connectivity. So things to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And people can always tell when you, like you said, when you were in Georgia. All right, guys. I know that Angela has to go, and we squeeze this thing in on Wednesdays at 1:30. We do give you an hour and a half. We come on at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. We stay on till about 3. We invited Tachi to come on because I know we were going to be talking about some of the television shows everybody having watched. I want to just put this back on. If you didn't, please go and check out and it turned out to be the first episode I thought maybe there were some more, but it's going to be something that's happening on Tuesdays. Definitely continuing. Yes, it last night's episode was highly promoted, trying to influence you to fill out your census, make sure you register, vote, and you said become a poll. Think about becoming a poll worker.
Volunteering as a poll worker. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the average age of poll workers in this country is over 60, because usually it's people who are retired who go in and work.
I'm going to think about that.
Because of COVID, really, if you're over 60, you should not be working if you can at all avoid being in that sort of circumstance. So trying to get younger people to do it, you get paid. I volunteered in the past. And so they give you, it's like you get a little bit of money for it. But it's a fantastic opportunity if you have the circumstances to go there. And what they're basically doing is asking us to be poll watchers, right? And to see what's going on in your local precincts. And so that if we have eyes on the ground, it's going to make it harder for these attempts at voter disenfranchisement. So this is sort of a dual path. More poll workers means more open locations. Our problems have been that precincts have not been able to be open because there was no one to work the polls. So if you've got people who can be there, they can have more voting locations open, and we have eyes on the ground to make sure that things are being done right. So if you can do it, I can't because of my circumstances.
Right.
I don't think anybody should feel bad if they can't.
Angela, stop trying to influence me to become a poll worker.
But if you want to spend a day out and and you're willing to take that risk, it would be a very, very noble and enriching thing to do for the day.
And there's some training involved. And I mean, from what I have watched, the men and women in my community that have done it, it seems to be like a lifelong commitment, because the poll workers have never changed. But I'm just thinking, whoa, indoor all day. I don't know.
Well, it used to be hard to get to be a poll worker. It took me a long time. I kept applying because people do it and they don't. They don't budge from it. So so this could be an opportunity too to get your foot in the door, get your spot for the next.
I'm going to think about it, because that's a damn burster. That's a damn burster right there. So I'm gonna definitely think about it. Like I said, we've obviously reached that age. And I understand. I think I was interested once or twice, maybe in the training of it, because it does give you a real inside look at our election process. And we always are encouraging people to do more than vote. Why not think about it? Angela, okay, you didn't convince me on the census.
I haven't convinced you on the census yet, but
you did convince me to look at that. All right. So what does everybody have coming up this week? And then Angela, you're going to give us some leading women words of wisdom. Tachi, tell everybody how to follow you.
Okay, so I am at dr_Tachi, Tachi, on Instagram. That's a great way to reach me. You can also watch me on Mediascope every Wednesday. So tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern on Periscope, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, and WJMSradio.com. You can listen.
And see, that's awesome, guys. And that's one of the reasons why Leading Women Weekly is in the daytime, because Tachi comes on at night and I don't ever want to miss it. So we come on at 1:30, and then I do all my stuff around the household, and I get my notification that Mediascope is on, because she's going to give us everything media, tech, and pop culture. And I imagine you're going to be talking about the Kardashians tonight. Is that on your
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I have this hate relationship with them, so I will be talking about that.
Oh, will you also be talking about, because we didn't talk about it here, what TMZ had some employees to leave, some very well-known employees to leave, and there's a bunch of and I imagine this person, let me my thing is like trying to restart. I imagine, okay, come on, look, TMZ won't let me talk. I imagine this person was able to get a number of their cohorts to help them with the lawsuit that's happening. So there's a lot coming out about TMZ right about now.
Yes, I read about that
everybody knew.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So y'all, that's why Tachi is such a resource, such an absolute and amazing resource. And we're going to continue to invite her back on with us. And then again, you can catch her show in the evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Please go to her page, Mediascope, turn on all notifications so that you can be aware of that. Angela, we were talking about the book club that we are now still. Are we still on
Mhm.
PBS, or are we
Yeah,
jumping on to something else?
I think we're going to stay at least this week. We're going to keep
Okay.
with PBS because we'll give people a chance to get through some of the 26 profiles of
Of women.
women, of leading women in American history.
Unladylike 2020 is the
Yes.
hashtag, guys. Check it out. Unladylike 2020. PBS has put a series out there of some 20 plus women who have been almost somewhat erased in history, and but yet they've been erased in history, but yet there's all this amazing archival footage out there. So who birthed that dam?
Yep.
Right.
And so
All
yeah,
right.
it's the American Masters series, and
Okay.
and if you go to pbs.org, scroll down because they have an hour-long program, but scroll down. This is one. This is how we're doing. This is how Yolanda and I are doing it. And there's 20 some different 10 to 12 minute videos featuring a different woman. So it's fantastic. You get like a little chapter about one specific woman from American history, and then there'll be other supporting interviews around it, right? So like Hannah Nicole Jones was one of the experts that talked about Charlotta Bass. But you just in 10 minutes you get a full history lesson, multimedia history lesson about a woman who has done something exceptional
in real life.
Right. And I
Wow.
would say 80% of them I've never heard of. Right.
Exactly.
So, and I'm kind of up on stuff. So yeah. So really it's so easy, little chunks. So, we'll give people, another week to get through some little chunks, and there's so many books being released. September has, I think, 6 major publishers are releasing over 600 titles. And or is it 6,000? It's some ridiculous number of books, right?
Wow.
So we'll probably have another book before the month is out. But check it out, pbs.org.
And I missed our comments, but let's say hello to Cran. Is that Cran Wise? Had a couple of comments. Yes. So I'm going to throw those on the screen for you guys to at least catch in the replay. There has always been a demographic of those who can't make it. Your right should always have one bent. All right, so I'll throw those on the screen for you guys to catch the replay. Sorry if we missed engaging with you live. I was trying to produce and enjoy the show and all of that. Do we need words of wisdom except for, hey, listen, become a damn burster?
Become a dam burster. I think that's it. Become a dam burster. That's our leading words of wisdom.
There we go. All right, ladies, can I ask you guys to stay right there on screen? I'm going to end our broadcast so they can see all of our lovely faces. And we'll catch you guys next week. Don't forget, Tati's on tonight at 6 p.m. Media Scope. Don't miss it.
Thank you.